Welcome back, everybody. I know you guys missed me. So usually we're going live on Thursdays with Medical Sales Live, but this is a special State of MedTech edition because the market is hot. We got a lot of exciting companies that have decided to go the route of equity crowdfunding. And the benefit about that, in my opinion, is two things. Number one, we see a lot of exciting companies make it to market because they're able to raise more money through equity crowdfunding than they normally would through, let's say, traditional investors, right? Although a lot of traditional and institutional investors do invest in equity crowdfunding projects, right? This is one exciting way to do that. The other thing is that, for me at least, in MedTech, a lot of the MedTech industry, our community, from medical salespeople to physician, nurses, everything, can actually vote with their dollars and see these amazing companies come to market. So one of the companies that I've been really excited about is called HealthySole Biologics. HealthySole is a company that's creating a completely new category. Now, I don't want to take what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to steal the thunder from my guest. But before I bring them on, of course, let's start the show as we always do. Go ahead and comment what city you're joining in from. If you're enjoying this feed, please hit that emoji button. We're coming to you live from Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and of course, LinkedIn. And so we have a lot of people watching. We're excited to have you on. So please comment what city you're joining from. And with that being said, let me bring on our guest. That's my good friend and CEO and founder of HealthySole Biologics, Peter Castle. Peter, how's it going?
Hey, it's going well. Thank you very much, Omar. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm glad you're able to make some time. I know this was kind of like sort of last minute, but I was like, you know what, this would be a lot of fun. We should do sort of an open and live one, So we see the numbers of people joining on. So hi, everybody. Hopefully we'll get some people to comment what city they're joining from. Although I know a lot of people usually listen to the show during the day while they're driving or in between places. So if you're doing that, please don't comment on anything. Just focus on the road. So Peter, before we bring up your presentation, maybe you can give just a quick introduction to yourself and the company, and then we'll dive right in. So for everybody who's watching, we're going to do a quick intro and pitch of the company, and then Peter's going to take some live questions.
Yeah, sure. So a little bit of my background. I went to college in California, grew up in California, moved to New York to do some kinds of marketing work that I was doing. Of course, that's where a lot of people go. I was working in some adjacent areas to medical marketing. I was representing print ad photographers who were doing things for Pfizer, GE, groups like that. And essentially, I began to slip into this project almost by accident. The idea of it kind of came about, almost as a joke. My partner was an older gentleman. He lived in Midtown. We would have meetings at his apartment. And what ended up happening was he was a germaphobe. And so we kicked around this idea of, there's got to be a way to deal with germs on shoes without having to take their shoes off. We weren't going to have his clients take his shoes off. So we kicked this idea around and we kind of come up with this concept, and it's just sort of rolled from there. We got some fantastic patents. We got some interest from healthcare and other sort of healthcare adjacent areas. And it's just kind of rolled out of our control into what we have today, which is a company that has amazing international patents and protection. We have really boxed out this market and built it from the ground up. worked with great researchers, and have amazing sales internationally.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, and one thing I will mention is that you guys have really a really impressive list of customers. Usually for startups, the customer list is kind of barren, but your customer list is really really impressive. And so that being said, let's pull up your presentation. And at any
Yeah.
point, so this crowdfunding campaign is live. And so for those who are interested, make sure to check it out. You can check it out while we're presenting here, which is you can go to invest.healthysole, sold spelled SOLE.com. You'll see the investor deck there along with all the information. Minimum investment, I believe, starts at $500. Is that correct, Peter?
Yeah, just over $500. It's I think 160 shares at 340 a piece. So I think minimum investment is 502, somewhere around there.
Perfect. Perfect. Wonderful. So with that being said, let me put that on the ticker and let's bring up your presentation and
Great.
go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. Well, I'm CEO and co-founder of HealthySole. We started our company roughly 10 years ago, first thinking about doing something along the lines of consumer products, but have fallen very much into the commercial space. Now, our product is an infection prevention product. We have seen that there's a massive problem in terms of infections within hospitals. In the US alone, it's estimated that hospitals are paying roughly $55 billion out of their revenue just to cover the cost of infections that occur within their facilities. We saw that there was an unaddressed problem of soles, shoes and shoe soles being a transfer of these pathogens throughout a space, and we chose to address it. Now, why is this problem continuing to increase? Any of these reasons that you see up on the board have created a greater number of pathogen spreads and a greater chance of pandemics. Duke University recently proved out models that showed that every year there is a 2% chance of there being another pandemic at the degree of COVID-19. That means that in the next 22 years, there's a 38% chance that this could happen again. What that means is even in the best of times, our hospitals are not doing a very good job of protecting people. So 900,000 roughly infections happened last year. That was up from 700,000. All of the progress that we had made on dealing with infections in hospitals have been undone by COVID-19. This was important for a very specific reason, which is that it shows that hospitals and their strategy of leaning on compliance alone and the healthcare professional following a list of compliance rules is not enough. The CDC in 2015 said that 70% of infections are preventable. Yet, we still continue to have this problem. The issue is that the method that hospitals are using is not enough. What we saw was that shoes were spreading infections. So if you actually culture the soles of shoes of healthcare professionals, you will find more often than not most of the pathogens that are pathogens of concern within hospitals. These then move throughout a hospital to every single patient you see. And every step that you take, there's a cloud 4 to 6 feet in the air of these micropathogens that can land on touch surfaces. The issue here is imagine that instead of it being invisible single cell organisms, it were red paint, and every step that you took transferred the red paint to the floor. Not only that, but any red paint that was on the floor then would get stuck to your shoe. That would mean that you're essentially bringing every single patient that you've seen today and every single patient that other healthcare professionals had seen that day to your next patient. And that goes on and on and on and allows for this enormous unaddressed version of pathogen spread. Why this isn't dealt with is that using chemical solvents really does not deal with the problem. First off, many hospitals are actually going away from chemical solvents. First off, because they degrade the tiles, which they don't want to reapply and pay for. And this wet mopping creates a risk of litigation. They don't want to get sued. The CDC has studies that showed that after 3 hours after terminal cleaning of a room, you are at previous levels of pathogen load. So that means that if you're mopping a floor every 12 hours, which most hospitals do not do, especially for patient rooms, you're at 9 hours of full microbial load, or you're at 21 hours of full microbial load. The way that our product deems to deal with the problem is to expose UVC light to the soles of shoes for 8 seconds to kill the single cell pathogens that cause these infections. There is no chemicals involved, there's no liquids. It takes 8 seconds. You can use it with booties or without. You literally stand on the device, you wait for the 8 seconds of exposure to pass, and you move on. We've gotten 2 log kill reductions on most of these pathogens, with C. difficile being a spore is a little lower. And this happens in just 8 seconds. The UVC light disrupts the single cell organism's DNA, causing it to be rendered either inert or totally dead. We wanted to see early on how the process actually affected hospital rooms. We were approached by the University of Houston School of Pharmacy, and they decided to use this protocol. What we did was we spiked a DNA tag strain of E. coli in the sole of a shoe and moved through a mock hospital room. They walked for 15 minutes throughout the room, making no physical contact with any touch surface. They then swabbed each of these surfaces hundreds of times. The red numbers are the percentage of positive swabs. That shows that strain of E. coli that was on the sole of the shoe transferred to the bed and was found on 100% of the swabs, 96% of the patient, 98% of the furniture. When using our product in that process, that basically spiking the sole of the shoe, standing on the unit, then moving through the room, you see that everything that is above the floor is roughly a 90% reduction of transfer from the shoe sole to the patient. Why this is important is we still believe that hands are a very, very big part of infection control. What this research had showed is that when healthcare professionals have already washed their hands, then begin to treat the patient, they are interacting with objects that they would believe or assume to be clear of these pathogens, but are actually not. So you wash your hands, you use the Purell. The second that you touch things inside of these rooms, you're immediately having a reintroduction of these pathogens and transferring it to the patient. As a result, we've had fantastic adoption from some very, very serious clients. The National Institute of Health purchased the unit and tested it internally for 6 months before adopting the unit fully across Frederick's Labs, which is a testing lab that does FDA efficacy and safety standards for AIDS, cancer, and vaccine medication. It is government protocol to stand on the unit that is in the antechambers. AbbVie has taken it internally for use in their antechambers. The VA has it across multiple hospitals and long-term living facilities that are for veterans. Google purchased it for their executives to use in the boardrooms during COVID-19 so that they would be safe to do work that was unable to be done, was too high confidentiality to be done over the internet. New York Presbyterian uses it in their compounding pharmacy lab. The list goes on. What COVID showed us is a massive, massive market size that we want to capitalize on. Just looking at hospitals and healthcare adjacent areas alone, we see an enormous opportunity. When we're talking about hospitals and other kinds of care, it's not only just large medical centers, but small regional hospitals, elective surgery centers, long-term care facilities, private practices, orthodontistry, the list just goes on. But during COVID, we saw a very good adoption across the rest of these markets. CMS, police, Los Angeles Police Department purchased 40 units. This was before COVID-19 because they were finding typhus and typhoid fever outbreaks in their facilities. We've had conversations with people in food and beverage, aeronautics, cruises, all kinds of spaces. We are looking to capitalize on just about all of them. The method of growing this market is essentially to work with sales liaison and salespeople, whether they be 1099 or distributors within these areas, while also using capital that we've raised to have internal sales teams. One other thing is we mentioned the $2.6 billion market. That is for European or for US markets. When you count the rest of the world, we're looking at a roughly 7 to 9 billion more on top as the market size. So with enough capital, what we would want to do is start a small office within the EU. Switzerland is a country that actually gives you tax incentives and tax breaks if you hire European employees. And we would use their best practices and logical adoption systems to get pilot studies or pilot programs done in small regional hospitals in some of the smaller EU countries, and use the results there to then move to larger adoption within that market as well. There really is no competitor. Booties are ineffective. They were never meant to deal with microbiology spread. They're meant to prevent soiling of shoes of the healthcare professional if something were to come out of the patient. Wet baths are obviously a non-starter within a hospital space. And there's one competitor who followed us into the market. Their product is 3 to 6 times more expensive than ours, and that is due to the fact that our patents are very strong. What we want to do with the capital is we want to bring the price down. Right now, the price is roughly around $5,600 a unit. We need to be around $2,000 to $2,600. Ways that we could do this is to move manufacturing offshore and to pull out a lot of the complications of this current unit that we have and make it a minimum viable product so that it is as cheap and straightforward as possible. We don't have any regulatory hurdles. We could scale to any market, and our product greatly benefits economy of scale in terms of manufacturing. When you see these large, these metallic bumps that you can see on the unit, those are actually our patent and the special sauce of our product. UVC does not pass through glass or plastic. It only passes through Teflon and quartz, both of which are unrealistic products to stand on. What our patent does, these bumps lift the shoe off of the top plate, allowing for light to reflect and refract between the top plate and the shoe. So while you'll see we have a negative space of about 50 or 60%, which allows the light through, we get exposure to the sole of the shoe of 97% of the shoe. And this means that 97% of the shoe is essentially disinfected through the process, and that patent has been great in protecting us. In fact, that patent is called the utility patent, which is a novel use of an already established technology. We've had 3 utility patents awarded to us in America. We've also had the same patents awarded in Japan, China, South Korea, Spain, and we're awaiting approval in India. These were important territories because they allowed us to essentially take the largest manufacturing hubs off of these territories and prevent somebody from following us into the market. Our seasoned management team has extremely amazing experience across a number of fields. Our co-founder, Robert Castle, has had 2 prior IPO exits that were successful. He was a former financial lawyer and investment banker. He understands the financial systems from top to bottom and how to make a company a success. Kathy Wareeye has been involved in infection control and the advocacy for dealing with the problem for many years. She has very deep connections in terms of that space and can provide any type of connection or door opening that we need. And Max Trena, he has been a sales executive at 3 unicorn companies, Yelp, Postmates, and NextHealth. NextHealth was a SaaS health-based program that recently had a $1 billion valuation. He understands how to sell innovative technologies or innovative services to new customers. Our pathway to exit is an acquisition. We want to attempt to either be acquired or have a NASDAQ opening based upon inventing other products. Essentially, the way to get there is to scale aggressively, to have adoption across the board that shows a very strong upward trajectory. To do that, we need to lower the price, get the right salespeople, and move hard on both that and the European market. And we have a clear pathway to revenue. We see in year 5 a roughly $90 million revenue in the United States alone. This added with the European market and potential Asian markets would bring us to a revenue in year 5 of roughly 121 million, which we see we could leverage for an exit of about 480 million. So given our current valuation, we're looking at in 3 to 5 years, a 4x valuation and 4x exit. What we're doing is trying to raise 40 million using the Regulation A plus raise. We're selling our shares at $3.40 a share. And we're looking for the right partners. We have a fantastic product that's shown need. We just need to scale it. We need the right partners to do that. So thank you very much for checking out the deck.
Fantastic. Fantastic, Peter. Let me come back into the screen here. Yeah, so that's really exciting, and we'll see if there's any questions from the audience. So, a couple of things I wanted to address that I really liked about what you guys did. One is Even though it's not an FDA, you don't need to go through the FDA on this. You guys did do the clinical studies to
Yep.
validate the efficacy of the product,
Yep.
which I think is really, really important. The second thing is, it looks like healthcare and hospitals are your beachhead, which makes sense. But you've already gotten adoption outside of healthcare, and you mentioned like Sony and Google. Can you talk a little bit about that? And maybe if you can go back, I'd like to bring that slide back up. If you can go back to
Sure.
it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely.
there we go. Yeah, yeah. Can you walk us through? So like, um, tell us a little bit like about. I'd like to know more about like what made the NIH adopt it.
Well, a lot of these sales have actually been natural sales. So these are customers that came to us looking for a product to help keep their spaces safe. And that is incredibly encouraging. We haven't had the opportunity or Salesforce to really go out and drive adoption the way that we would want to. And so these customers saw that there was a problem, which is that in general, we don't have a lot of safety mechanisms and protocols in place for dealing with large numbers or even small numbers of people coming together and staying safe. Essentially, it is always just compliance, 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 which at the end of the day ends up falling short, right? If you're asking somebody for compliance, but you're not giving them all the tools to do the job, you've got a problem, right? So what these customers did is they came to us, and a lot of them, including the NIH, ended up testing them internally. So what they would do is they would purchase the unit, they would then set up their own testing methods, culturing, environmental test methods to see what they could find in terms of pathogen spread or the decline of such a thing. That has come back as positive across the board every time that we've done it as well. We've had studies done by the VA hospitals. They've had great results. University of Houston, which we had mentioned, and clients of ours who have adopted it have mentioned that they've either seen no increase to sterile areas, which would be exactly what you want, right? If you're a sterile area, you're not going to see better results. And for folks who needed better results, they got them. For example, the LAPD saw the reduction of the typhus and typhoid fever outbreak that they had had. Sony adopted it in a recording studio in New York City so that recording artists during COVID could come and feel safe about recording their albums. I mean, there's all kinds of work that had to still be done within the COVID time or a pandemic time that people wanted to protect themselves against. So the biggest sales that we've had, and this is sort of a sign of a healthy product or a valuable product, the biggest sales that we have had have been returning customers who buy one, two, three, and come back and purchase far more of them due to positive morale around the product or proof of its value for them.
Got it. And that's fantastic to see as well. The one thing that I like, and again, I'm lucky enough that I received one of your guys' like first models, because for me, I wear my shoes at home, and again, I don't go to the hospital anymore, so I'm not a rep, but like, I do travel a lot. And it used to be that I used to have like, I had to buy other shoes and decide which one I wear in the house and whatnot. And now like your device, the HealthySole, actually sits right at the door, from my garage. So I get out of my car, I disinfect my shoes, which takes like 8 seconds, and I feel really comfortable walking in my house. And especially for me, I have an 11-month-old, and so I feel a lot more safe about that. And so that's the
Yeah.
part that I really like. And again, this is a house versus like in hospitals. I can't imagine, based on the education I've received from you, but how easy it is to track pathogens from the outside inside, and those, let's
Yeah.
face it, those booties really don't do much. And in fact, you kind of educated me that those booties are mainly to protect while you're in the surgery, not to necessarily prevent what you're bringing from the outside in,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, they're not for microbial purposes. You might see some ways of dealing with essentially particulates. So if you're dealing with clean rooms that have extremely delicate sensitive materials, sensitive instruments, obviously that still has a lot of value there. But yeah, it's not, you know, think of it basically like a hairnet in a cafeteria, right? It's not going to really change microbiology. It's essentially going to keep something in and something out. So the minute that you're walking around with these on a floor, you're essentially just collecting any of that biomatter right up into the material and dragging it around with you everywhere you go. And that sort of is the biggest problem. There's an irony within hospitals that we are bringing the people who are the most infectious into the very same building as the people who are the most immunocompromised. And then what we're doing is essentially having the same medical professionals move from patient to patient to patient. So essentially, this line of connection, which is the medical professional, is just given the one tool of compliance. Wash your hands from going from point A to point B, wear gloves at certain points when touching a customer. That's it. And that's not enough.
Absolutely. We got a question actually. So Dean Vasquez says he's late to the presentation. Don't worry, Dean, you can actually rewatch this. But he said, how do you measure microbes collected and tracked?
So there's a couple of ways that we've done this before. Most of the time in terms of testing the way that they move around, one is if you're doing something like a random control trial, we'll DNA tag them so that we know exactly what strain of this micropathogen is sort of moving around. And then what you'll do is, you collect with swabs, you'll swab a surface, you'll culture it, and then you'll look at the number of colonies and the density of them. So for example, we didn't really do this for a study, but this was actually just to see sort of real world knockdown effects. We had a customer who had placed them within their hematology oncology wards due to some infection issues there. And they were just curious. So they did a double blind, essentially, one unit that had active UVC, one unit that did not have any active UVC. And they then were swabbing 1 square foot areas in multiple spaces of the room, including the clean air input, basically where air that had been sterilized and treated and the HVAC system was coming back into the patient's room. What they found was that these touch surfaces had enormously large colonies of C. diff, a fecal spore. The feces had not been placed upon the wall. This had basically collected to the wall and cultured due to air movements. And so on our unit, they were having about a 70 to 90% compliance rate of standing on the unit when entering into the room. And keep in mind, C. diff, we get about an 85% kill rate due to the way that spores work with UVC. They found that after using our product for, I think, a month, if not 2 months, they saw a reduction of C. diff in that room by 30%. And that's across density and number of colonies. And so what they had found was essentially that it wasn't just that the healthcare professional might be tracking more C. diff into the room in terms of what they came into contact that day, but that the colonies that were there were essentially supporting their general size by consuming the biomatter that was being brought in on the health professional's shoes. So essentially, once we cut that line of transmission, those colonies could no longer support their size and began to retract. So these are ways in which we can see how these microbes are moving throughout the space, how they're collecting with each other, proliferating. I mean, you see this all the time in terms of things like CRE, MRSA outbreaks and things like that, where you can find that there is a similar DNA structure from one patient to the next. So you can track that they've been moving throughout a hospital. But for our test purposes, it's mainly been DNA tagged strains or of central area collection and monitoring.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Peter, and thank you, Dean, for the question. A couple other questions that came in outside of the broadcast, which I'll bring up the most interesting one, which is the best reason to invest in HealthySole. And so I'm going to give you my personal opinion. And again, I want to remind everybody, and let me bring up the ticker. For those who are interested, go to invest.healthysole.com and check out the deck there and everything. As with anything else, this is a startup. All startup investments are risky, so please keep that in mind. That being said, my personal opinion about this is that at least what I look for in startups to invest in, work with, etc., is, are they in fact designing their own category, right? And if they are doing that, do they have traction to be the dominant player in the category king, right? And in this case, like for me at least, HealthySole checks off both those boxes. You guys are creating a new category. It's not like you're going into an existing category trying to compete with $1 billion giant, which a lot of companies do, and it makes no sense to me why they do that. And the second thing is, a lot of companies, not a lot, some startups are smart enough to say, hey, we're going to design our own category. Okay, great. But then do you actually have traction with potential customers who are going to help like define a category? Otherwise, you don't have anything. And in this case, even though like, is all of Google, all of the NIH using HealthySole? No, but the fact that they've adopted on their own is a really positive sign for me. So for me, at least, everything is there for a really exciting investment, in my opinion, and a really interesting one. And then I don't know. I personally I feel like this makes a lot of sense, whether it's a hospital acquisition or a strategic in terms of being bolted on with a suite of different technology and stuff. So that's my take. Peter, what's your you can't come up with many. I always tell CEOs you have to come up with your number one reason why should somebody invest in HealthySole?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of them, right? Like the science proves out, the market proves out, the market is huge. But I see this really as being valuable because it has enormous number of applications. Essentially, what this is doing is what our product has done is provided an example of targeted technology towards unaddressed issues, right? And that's I think the hallmark for so many valuable companies is sort of saying, look, there is a need here and we have the right technology to fulfill that. And so while hospitals have been so much of our focal point, the truth is that the majority of our sales have been outside of that space. And that is without our spending time and resources on that, right? What we're talking about here is being able to partner with distributors in health and in food processing, in skincare or sterile manufacturing, being able to partner with distributors in travel. This, as opposed to some kind of other medical product, because we're not FDA based, we don't have compliance issues. It is with the right manufacturer and the right design, incredibly affordable to manufacture. There is an enormous amount of opportunity to address an issue that is enormous and unaddressed, that plagues essentially every public space. I mean, if this job is done right and we either partner with the right partner or acquire with the right people or hit the ball out of the park ourselves, you could see a product similar to this in public restrooms. When you're standing and drying off your hands at the air dryer, you could be standing at this product. You could be standing on it when entering into your hotel room. You could be standing on it when on a cruise. You could be standing on it at the jetway before you get on a flight. You could be standing on it before entering your office or before going into any kind of public space like that. There are applications for this across the board. It only takes 8 seconds to use. So I gave you a very long answer, since you only let me have one answer, to why I think that this is a great opportunity, is because it is something that is desperately needed everywhere that people get together. And we started 10 years ago. We knew something like COVID was coming. And we've seen an example of how unprepared we are for infectious pathogens in this world. We need to start adopting products. And our product shows that can be incredibly profitable for everybody who adopts it. So that's essentially my reason why I think this is a great product and a great investment opportunity.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, Peter, I'm gonna. I know you're very, very busy, so I'm gonna wrap things up. And again, I want to remind everybody, the information provided here is definitely not investment advice. This is all, intended to inform and educate you, for you to learn more. And again, HealthySole will be closing out their equity crowdfunding campaign soon. So be sure to go to invest.healthysole.com. Read the papers yourself, check out their investment deck, and consider joining their crowdfunding campaign. Again, Peter, I want to thank you for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Always love talking about it.
Awesome. All right, everybody, take care and have a wonderful day.